Security moved instantly. In moments, the most powerful figure in Britain was encircled as cameras tracked every motion and every reaction. This was not noise outside the gates or speculation online. It happened live, before millions, at the very core of British democracy. A single moment changed the atmosphere, one confrontation forced the system beyond its limit, and now, as crowds surge through Westminster demanding answers, a stark question grips the country. Has the Prime Minister just undone his own government? Stay with me, because what unfolded inside Parliament minutes ago reveals why Britain is standing at the edge of the unknown. It was Wednesday afternoon, Prime Minister's questions, the most watched and most volatile half-hour in British politics. The green benches were crammed, the air tight with pressure, every lens fixed on the front bench. It was supposed to be routine, sharp lines, practiced attacks, predictable replies, politics by script. But this time was different. You could feel it before a word was spoken. MPs whispered with urgency, journalists leaned in, and the nation watched as pressure on the Prime Minister had been building for weeks, polls falling, unity fracturing, anger outside Westminster rising by the day. Inside the chamber, the spark was already burning. Everyone sensed something was about to give, they just didn't know when. Then Nigel Farage stood slowly. No shouting, no drama, just a deliberate silence, followed by a voice that sliced through the room. He didn't mock and he didn't attack. He read out the numbers, border crossings continued to climb, hotel bills kept bleeding public funds, and deportations promised to voters were cancelled again and again. Then the mood changed. He pointed to leaked papers, to discreet conversations with Brussels, to talks around EU-linked migration frameworks the government had sworn were finished for good. The chamber locked up instantly. Labour and SNP members shifted uneasily. This no longer felt like debate, it felt like a charge sheet. Each line landed with precision, leaving no escape. The questions were blunt and punishing, the kind that demand truth, not spin. Farage stopped, stretching the silence until it became unbearable, then delivered the sentence that blew the room apart, not a slogan, not a speech, but a direct strike at the Prime Minister's credibility and control. For a moment, Starmer said nothing. His jaw set, his grip tightened on the dispatch box, and you could almost watch prepared answers fall apart under the weight of the moment. Then he stood. What followed was not measured force or sharp exchange, but something exposed and uncontrolled. He pointed across the chamber, his voice climbing as words spilled faster than restraint could hold them. Claims flew, tempers flared, and the polished image cracked completely. The speaker called for order once, then again, and was ignored both times. The room went still as MPs on every side realized the line had been crossed. This was no longer routine politics. This was a leader unraveling in full view of the country. Then the speaker stood, voice firm and final, invoking a rule so rarely used it usually stays buried in the rulebook. The chair's authority was final and unquestionable, the instruction blunt and unmistakable. The Prime Minister was to leave the chamber at once. A shockwave of silence followed, so heavy it seemed to halt everything. Starmer looked around, searching for backing, for intervention, for anything, but there was nothing. Not from his benches, not from his cabinet, not from a single ally. Security stepped in calmly and efficiently as cameras pushed closer, recording every second. His objections came out thin and fading, each word weaker than the last, but the decision was already sealed. He was escorted out step by step, his authority visibly draining as MPs watched in disbelief while a sitting Prime Minister was removed from Parliament. It was historic, unprecedented, and unfolding live. Within minutes, the news ignited outside. Crowds formed at Westminster, phones lit up nationwide, and social platforms detonated as the footage spread at staggering speed. One word drowned out everything else: resign. This was no routine crisis or passing scandal. It signaled the start of something far larger and far more volatile, and the country could feel the foundations shifting. Inside Parliament, staff rushed through corridors staring at screens, reporters scrambled for live shots, and police sirens echoed as security tightened around Westminster. By the time Starmer reached his office, the images were everywhere, raw, relentless, unavoidable, Britain watching its leader lose control in real time as the backlash hit instantly and without mercy. Outside Downing Street, the crowd grew fast, swelling from a few angry voices to hundreds, then thousands, as calls for resignation rolled through the cold air and phones were raised to broadcast the moment to the world. Inside government offices, panic replaced planning as advisors scrambled to regain control of a story that no longer belonged to them. The footage needed no spin: a prime minister defying the speaker, a leader buckling under pressure, a government suddenly revealed as brittle and exposed. Efforts to dismiss it as emotional defiance collapsed as the clips replayed again and again, delivering the same unmistakable message: control lost. The public stopped asking what had happened and began passing judgment, and that judgment was merciless. Political reaction crashed in like a wave as opponents sensed weakness. Reform UK pushed the footage relentlessly, while Conservatives branded the moment a constitutional humiliation, openly questioning competence and stability. Inside Labour, the atmosphere soured almost instantly, with angry messages from voters, panic in private group chats, and MPs quietly wondering how much damage one figure could inflict before dragging the party down with him. The media went into full saturation mode, dissecting every frame as headlines escalated toward humiliation and constitutional crisis, while international outlets framed it as evidence of deeper instability, and markets trembled as confidence slipped. Polls soon followed with devastating force. Approval ratings collapsed, focus groups used unforgiving words: shaken, weak, unfit, reckless. Trust fell away in a single motion as Reform UK surged, and the political centre fractured in real time. As night settled, Downing Street stayed illuminated but silent, and that silence spoke volumes. Protests became routine, disciplined and unyielding, while coverage hardened and satire locked the moment permanently into public memory. Within weeks, the fallout hardened into a full-scale leadership crisis as Labour's support slid, confidence letters quietly circulated, donors stalled, and MPs began weighing their own survival. Starmer grew increasingly isolated, appearing less often, his words drained of force by an image that refused to disappear, while Nigel Farage's profile surged at remarkable speed, reshaping the political landscape as long-held loyalties fractured. Public trust in politics sank to historic lows. Analysts warned of an unstable and unpredictable period ahead, and constitutional experts questioned whether authority stripped away so publicly could ever be reclaimed. What started as a single eruption was now seen as years of pressure finally breaking through, exposing not just one leader but a system under stress. Britain waits, watching each development with weary intensity, knowing the question is no longer if change is coming, but how fast and how severe it will be. Because this crisis has shown that in modern politics, everything can shift in minutes, power can disappear in seconds, and once it does not return. As the crisis moved into its second month, the national mood hardened into something colder and more threatening for those still holding on. Shock gave way to expectation of accountability, of resolution, of an ending that feels overdue. The public is no longer focused on what happened in Parliament that day, but on why nothing decisive has followed. With every day the Prime Minister remains in office without clarity, the sense deepens that the government is stuck, suspended between denial and an unavoidable collapse. Inside Westminster, government grind forward on pure momentum but without confidence or clear direction. Bills pass quietly, announcements barely register, and ministers move cautiously, as if fearing another eruption. The authority that once commanded the chamber now struggles to maintain even attention. Diplomats speak of uncertainty, civil servants brace for sudden upheaval, and the machinery functions, but feels neither secure nor legitimate. Polling trends are impossible to ignore. Undecided voters harden into broad disillusionment with the political class, and resignation, once controversial, now polls as mainstream, even among Labour loyalists. The debate within shifts from defence to timing, from loyalty to damage control, as the political clock ticks louder each day. Reform UK exploits the chaos with disciplined focus, presenting the crisis as proof that traditional parties are out of touch. Media narratives cement the incident as a definitive before and after in modern British history, while analysts and historians openly compare it to moments when authority collapsed overnight and never returned. Behind the scenes, contingency plans quietly form, potential successors position themselves, party factions sharpen arguments, all while publicly insisting on unity. Everyone within the system senses the endgame approaching. No one can predict the exact trigger, but it hangs in the air, palpable in conversations and in the persistent tension. The only question remaining is what will finally bring it to a head: a resignation from Downing Street, a leadership challenge from within, or a political shock that forces immediate change. Whatever comes next, one reality is unavoidable: the moment inside Parliament did not fade, it reshaped the political landscape, and the country knows history has already been made. Yet as that truth settles, pressure continues to mount instead of easing. Each day without decisive action sharpens public frustration and deepens the sense of drift at the top. Confidence once fractured does not return gradually, it drains completely, leaving a vacuum others rush to fill. Inside Westminster, whispers have become open conversations in corridors and committee rooms. Senior figures speak cautiously, selecting words with care, but the message is clear: the situation is no longer sustainable. The question is no longer whether the Prime Minister's position is weakened, but whether it has already become untenable nationwide. That judgment unfolds in real time. Constituency surgeries overflow, MPs report packed halls, angry questions, and voters demanding to know why a leader so visibly stripped of authority remains in office. For many, the parliamentary incident has become emblematic, a single image crystallizing years of frustration. It is cited repeatedly as proof that those in power no longer control events, and that the political system struggles under mounting pressures. Trust, already fragile, continues to erode as uncertainty dominates public life. Inside the Labour Party, tension can no longer be hidden, emergency meetings multiply, and the tone shifts from caution to urgency. Figures once seen as steadfast in leadership now hedge, offering carefully measured statements that stop short of full support. Internal divisions widen as MPs calculate the electoral cost of aligning with a leader whose authority has been so publicly undermined. The threat is no longer abstract, it is immediate, electoral, and deeply personal. Seats once considered safe appear precarious, and self-preservation grows with every grim poll. Meanwhile, the opposition relentlessly presses its advantage, framing every prime ministerial appearance through the lens of competence and legitimacy. The image from that day in the chamber lingers, resurfacing in debates, interviews, and analysis, becoming the reference point by which every subsequent action is judged and found lacking. Government attempts to shift focus to policy or legislation repeatedly fail to break through. Outside Westminster, the mood hardens further. Protests continue, steady, disciplined, determined, not fueled by shock but by conviction. The chance for leniency has passed, and the message grows only louder. This is no longer anger, it is sustained demand for accountability. International observers watch closely, recalibrating their expectations of Britain's political stability. At the center of it all sits a prime minister increasingly isolated, adrift in events he can no longer control. Every public appearance is dissected, every statement measured against the stark reality of diminished authority. Silence is damaging, but speaking carries equal risk. Options narrow, and what once seemed a survivable crisis now unfolds as a slow-motion reckoning, inching closer by the hour. The nation holds its breath, not for a single announcement or dramatic act, but in recognition that the system itself nears a breaking point. Something must give: resignation, rebellion, or an external shock, because the status quo cannot last. The events in Parliament did more than humiliate a leader, they revealed a fault line running through British politics. As pressure continues to build along it, the question is no longer what happened, but what will break next. That inevitability shifts the country from anticipation to preparation. Politicians, media, and the public act as if an ending is imminent, even if its shape remains uncertain. Commentary no longer asks whether the Prime Minister can recover, it debates how the transition might unfold and what follows. The assumption of continuity, once the foundation of governance, quietly dissolves, replaced by an awareness that the current moment is temporary and increasingly untenable. Inside Whitehall, the impact is clear. Senior civil servants launch serious contingency planning, running through scenarios they had long hoped never to confront. Departments slow their pace, hesitant to commit to initiatives that might be overturned by new leadership or an early election. Long-term planning gives way to short-term management, and the atmosphere grows cautious, even brittle, as officials struggle to keep the state running while political authority above them erodes. The line between governing and simply administering has never been clearer. In Parliament, the Prime Minister's presence carries a new weight. Silence falls not from respect but from scrutiny. Every gesture is analyzed for weakness, every response tested for credibility. Questions once shrugged off now hit hard, framed around legitimacy and control. Even allies offer support that sounds formal rather than sincere. Authority once assumed now must be asserted, and the act only underscores how much has already slipped away. Public patience continues to thin, with polls showing hardening attitudes, fewer undecided voters, and mounting frustration at perceived delay. The ongoing standoff increasingly feels like avoidance, a refusal to face reality, corroding not just government credibility but faith in the system itself. Meanwhile, the opposition capitalizes on the mood with growing confidence, statements grow sharper, demands more pointed. Motions, inquiries, and procedural maneuvers are no longer just critiques, they are tools of sustained pressure. The goal is no longer merely to weaken the Prime Minister, but to force a resolution. Every day without one is framed as another day of drift, another day of national uncertainty, a framing that resonates because it mirrors public sentiment. Within the governing party, exhaustion spreads as MPs and staff operate in crisis mode week after week. Tension erodes discipline and patience, and the fragile unity that remains begins to fray. Conversations about loyalty give way to candid assessments of risk, and for some, the calculation is stark: staying silent may cost more than speaking out. Momentum shifts again, more decisively, feeding a growing sense that Britain has entered a transitional phase unacknowledged in name. Power structures remain, but their authority feels diminished, their permanence uncertain. The country continues to function, yet under a cloud of uncertainty touching markets, diplomacy, and public confidence in leadership. It is an unusual and uncomfortable state for a system built on stability and continuity. Tension tightens further. Space for delay shrinks. Each unanswered question amplifies pressure, and every attempt to act normally feels less convincing. The moment inside Parliament is no longer just memory, it is the lens through which all else is now viewed.